In this video, we'll be going over the carriers and the carrier policies. In TPS, before you add a patient in, you should make sure that you have the carrier for that patient entered into the system first. You won't be getting too far if you add the patient but then can't attach a carrier to assign the services to. To get started, click the Open folder with the magnifying glass, and you'll get your Start menu. Here, under the Master Files section in the middle, we can select Carrier to open up a carrier section. Here we have the cache carrier that comes pre-programmed with the system, but we're going to go ahead and create a new one. Hit the plus icon at the top to add a new record, and click Yes when it asks if you want to add a new carrier. And then enter the pertinent information. Put the address in. There's a second line below if you need it. The city, state, and zip. Phone number. A fax number if you have one. The contact information. We don't have any, so we'll skip that. We're going to be a group type carrier. And we're going to choose the basic CMS 1500 General 0805. Below we have the e-billing information, but because this is paper billing, we don't need to fill that out. And over here we have some fields that have to do with automated messages. This section is covered in the Wizard tutorial videos, and if you need to review them, please watch the videos that go through the process of setting up the carrier section. Now that we've filled out the necessary information over here, we can go ahead and click Carrier Policies, and it'll ask us if we want to create a new one. We'll hit Yes, and then Yes again. In here we have a blank slate for a carrier policy. You can see the carrier name and their address at the top here, so we know which carrier this policy is going towards. Here we can name the policy. It's a good idea to name the policy something specific in relation to the policy itself. For instance, this is a general 80-20 policy where the carrier will cover 80% of services, with the patient picking up the remaining 20. We're going to go ahead and name something like Blue Cross, but abbreviated, Blue Shield, and then 80/20. Below that we have the default policy service percent, as well as the default policy inventory carrier percent. These are the default percentages the carrier will cover on all your services and inventory items for the figure entered into these fields. For instance, the carrier is going to cover 80% of all services. 80. When entered, a question will appear asking if you want to change this for all service items or only change default items. Go ahead and click Yes to change it for all service items. And here, in the carrier percent column, you can see that all the services are now 80%, and the payment is broken down here under carrier pays and patient pays. For instance, 80% of 50 is $40, which the carrier is now designated to pay, and the patient will pay $10. For your Blue Cross Blue Shield patients who have this policy assigned to them, when the TENS unit is added, $40 will go to the carrier and $10 will go to the patient without you having to do any additional work, aside from assigning the service. Now let's say there are a couple exceptions here and there, such as the CMT 1-2s are 90% instead of 80. Simply highlight the percentage and change it to 90. Once you do so, you'll notice that this blue line appears, indicating an exception has been made to this policy. Exceptions imply that something is different than what was entered into the master list and the default percent up here on the left. Go ahead and highlight the rest of them, turn them to 90%. There we go. You can clear exceptions by clicking the Clear Exceptions button. Note though that if you do, you only have the option to clear all exceptions and not individual exceptions. More than just the percent can be altered. The base price of the service can be altered. The CPT code can be changed as well. I could add a GX modifier right here if necessary. And whenever I deliver the service, the GX modifier will be there instead of the usual 98,940 without the modifier. I could change the description too if I wanted. Now, to save yourself some time, you can duplicate policies of a similar nature so you don't have to re-enter them from scratch every single time you add a new carrier in. As an example, if I hit the plus icon to create a new record, I get this pop-up asking if I want to add a blank policy record. If I click Yes, it'll create a new policy for this carrier. That is an additional policy. Carriers can have multiple policies attached to them. This way you don't have to create a new carrier every single time you have a new policy. You can simply just add the new policy in. If I click No, I want to copy this information to a new policy and different carrier, I can do so. cancel will cancel out of this function completely. We want to take this policy and assign it to a different carrier to save some time, thus duplicating it. That option is covered by no. So we'll click no, and then it brings a list of all your carriers. Let's go ahead and find Aetna, specifically the Spokane. Now you'll see that the carrier says Aetna WA-Spokane and their address, but the policy name is the same. In fact, everything else is the same. That's because we duplicated the policy from Blue Cross Blue Shield. If all I need to do is change the name, it's simply a matter of highlighting, deleting, and then changing it to something like Aetna Spokane ED/20. If I needed to change the specific elements within here, I could, but for the most part, everything else is good, so I'm going to leave this alone. Instead of having to go to Aetna, create a new policy, adding the percentages, and fixing the CMTs all over again, I can simply duplicate existing policies and attach them to existing carriers. A convenient feature. Let's go ahead and walk through that one more time. Close out of here. I'm going to find the Department of Labor and Industries, carrier policies, and I'm going to duplicate this and attach it to a different one. Hit the Add New Record button, click No to copy this information to a new policy and different carrier. Now find my Washington Teamsters Welfare Trust, and then I'll just change the name. It's that simple. Closing out saves the data, and now if I navigate to that carrier, click the Carrier Policies button, we can see that there are now two, one of which I just duplicated from the Department of Labor and Industry. And that's pretty much it for carriers and policies.